Hi, I'm continuing to explore the topic of the culture of honor and how that benefits us in our relationships. And it has huge value and huge application for the success and happiness of our relationships, our families, our marriages, our children, all of those, our friendships, all of those kinds of things. One of the principles that we find is in Exodus chapter 20, and it's in verse 12. And this is actually part of what's called the Ten Commandments, where God first introduced to Israel many thousands of years ago what was called His Ten Commandments, and there was some guiding principles for life there. We're no longer under the Old Covenant. That was for the people of Israel thousands of years ago. However, many of the principles are clearly applicable to us today and very, very helpful to us today. And so in Exodus 20:12, one of the commandments said, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. Now, in the Bible, there's something called the law of first mention, which is a fancy way of saying that the first time a principle or a concept is mentioned, there's a real key given there, and that's generally true. And this is the first mention in the Bible, really by name, of honor, how to honor someone or who to honor, and then what happens if you do honor. And so when you look at this passage again, we see that God is saying, honor your father and your mother. Again, the word honor means value. It literally is connected to the idea of price or worth or value. And so God says He wants us to see our father and see our mother as people of great value and great worth, and to treat them with that honor. You know, and a lot of people might say, wow, my father and my mother were great and I really want to honor them. Somebody else might say, my father or my mother were not so great, very difficult to honor them. But God says it's not about their behavior, it's about your behavior. It's not about if they conducted themselves in an honorable way. It's about you choosing and learning to show honor to someone even that might not act in an honorable way. And when you show honor to someone because of their position that God has given them and the relationship God has given you with them, that God says there's a great reward in that for you. So He says, honor your father and your mother, and here's the reward, here's the promise, that your days may be long upon the land or upon the earth, which the Lord your God is giving you. This promise, this commandment is also quoted in Ephesians chapter 6, showing that it's applicable to us today, and the promise is applicable to us today. So God says, if you honor your father and mother, then you will live a long life and you'll be blessed on the earth. That's an amazing promise. What can we conclude from this promise? That honor is something that is so valuable to God that He attaches a huge promise to it, long life and blessing. And He says, if you honor, your parents, I will bless that so much. I value that so highly. Another way to say this is that life flows through honor, because the promise is long life. The promise is a quality of life, also a life that is blessed. And so we can conclude that life from heaven, life from God, literally flows through honor. Honor is a vehicle that brings life and releases life. And so when we learn to honor people that are in a position of authority, in our family, in our community, in our church, in any way like that, that God blesses us. Again, honor is not necessarily because everybody in leadership acts honorably, it's because we have learned to show honor. Someone wisely said, when I honor someone, it says a whole lot more about me than it says about them. Or when you honor someone, it says a lot more about you than it does about them. And so God introduces this concept here that we're to have a culture of honor and a value system of honor. For instance, a father and a mother, that's a title and a position that God instituted and God gave. And so when you recognize that a mother, that's a position that God gave, that's a title that God gave, or a father, a title and a position that God gave. And when you honor that person, really you're honoring God. Maybe indirectly, but you are honoring God, and He takes it that way. And when we learn to honor people who are in authority, we get lifted up. Here's a valuable principle for you that many, many people miss, because the culture of this world is often about dishonoring people. It's about lifting myself up and dishonoring everybody else. And if I lift myself up, I feel more important or whatever it may be, and I put other people down, and somehow that makes me feel better. And a lot of people embrace that way of thinking, embrace that culture, and the world pretty much promotes that way of thinking. and it's the opposite of heaven. In heaven, when you honor people around you, especially people that have a position or a title of authority, or you just honor people around you because they're made in the image of God and they're precious and valuable, what happens is that God says, I will lift you up. You will end up being the one who's promoted, the one who becomes more successful, the one who becomes more influential. God lifts up people that learn to show honor. It's an amazing reversal of the culture of this world, but it's actually the original culture. It's the culture of heaven. So God wants us to learn about the culture of heaven, bring it into our heart, into our thinking, into our home, into our family, into our church, and our community, and watch what happens. It brings life.